The Healthcare Security Cast is sponsored by 3D Network Technology. Reliability is our core value. Visit www.3dnetworktechnology.com. And by Genetec, delivering security strategies for healthcare. Visit Genetec, that's GENETEC.com. And by the Change Execution Group. Visit 360lifetransformations.com. Before we get into today's show, I want to invite you to connect with the Healthcare Security Cast on a new platform. It's a text-based platform called Community. To join, all you have to do is text my community number, and that number is 647-372-2042. That number again is 647-372-2042. The first message is automated. It's just to get you set up and added into the system. Everything after that will be direct engagement with me. This platform will allow you to stay up to date on everything that we're doing on the Healthcare Security Cast, as well as engage with me one-on-one. Also, as we move forward, there'll be other opportunities to connect with study groups and special interest groups. Your information is kept private, and you can opt out at any time by simply texting STOP. Again, to join, just text JOIN to 647-372-2042. That's 647-372-2042. Right now, text messages can only be received from Canada and the U.S.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
It's Friday, August the 21st, and welcome to episode 44 of the Healthcare Security Cast. Episode 50 is just around the corner, and I just want to thank you for your support for listening, and I really want to make a big deal out of episode 50. So stay tuned on social media and on the podcast as well, and I'll keep you up to speed with what's happening. Now on today's show, we're joined by Jordan Mendoza, and let's jump right into the content. Today on the Healthcare Security Cast, we're joined by Jordan Mendoza. Jordan, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Now, I always like to start off by finding out a little bit about the guest. So I'll start off by asking, who is Jordan Mendoza?
All right. Well, Jordan Mendoza is a husband, a father of 5 beautiful kids from the ages of 1 month old on Friday to our oldest being 15. We've got 3 boys, 2 girls. Wouldn't change anything about any of them, right? All different personalities, and it's really cool to see them grow and develop. So myself, I actually was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, out in Portland, Oregon, and I actually grew up with my mom had 5 boys, so five of us brothers, real big into sports, real big into wrestling. But something interesting about my mom is she was actually born in 1958 with 1 lung. Right. And
Wow.
back in the 50s, when you were born with 1 lung, the doctors essentially said, listen, you're definitely not gonna be able to have kids. The capacity that will go on your lungs and your body is just not going to happen. And you're probably not going to live past 18. So right from the beginning, she wasn't dealt a very good hand. But like I said, she lived to 54. She ended up having 5 boys, and she is by far the most influential person in my life. She taught me how to treat people right, how to treat people with kindness and empathy. And even though she had 1 lung, she still made sure that she invested in us when it came to sports, right? Making us feel loved, right? Even though we didn't have a whole lot, we grew up on welfare and food stamps, and really because she couldn't really work. I mean, it's very hard to work when you've got an oxygen tank that you have to carry around, but she stayed so positive. And I'm going to tell you 3 pivotal moments that I've actually experienced so far in my 39 years of life that a lot of people would look at and say, wow, each one of these has a lot of adversity in them. And honestly, I don't feel like I've even faced adversity yet, knowing what my mom went through for 54 years. And so this will give really people some context. So in 4th grade, I was at the 4th grade picnic. We're playing baseball. We've got hula hoops where everyone's just kind of hanging out. I still to this day don't know why there was a picnic for fourth grade graduation. I mean, you still had to go to fifth grade to get out of elementary school. But anyways, we had this picnic and I'm up to bat. And I tell you, Kirby Puckett was one of my favorite baseball players. So I always had had to have the bat back a little high. And I remember swinging the bat. And just like in the movies, the bat leaves my hand. It flies behind me. I do one of those spin around things. It lands under a Douglas fir tree. And I don't know if you've seen a Douglas fir tree before, but they are massive trees, very lush. I grab the bat. I stand up. There's a beehive on top of my head. So here I am in fourth grade. I'm being stung. I'm running. Kids are running away from me. I'm doing somersaults and front handsprings trying to get these bees off of me. And I start running towards teachers. Some of them are running away because there's bees chasing me. And I get stung 53 times in fourth grade. So that's first pivotal moment. And again, if I was allergic to bees, brother, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Exactly.
So fast forward a couple years later, seventh grade, we moved for probably the 14th time in 14 years. Again, I don't know why we moved a lot, probably because we got evicted. I don't know. We didn't have a whole lot of money. But I remember moving 3 towns away. And I had gone from elementary to middle school, from kindergarten to 6th grade with all my same friends. So I begged my mom. I said, Mom, please don't make me go to a new school. I don't care if I have to take 2 buses, like 2 public buses, I'll do it. So we got on the bus route. She showed me the route. I was ready for the year. And sometime in the spring, I was really doing my same routine every day. I took 1 bus that dropped me off at a 7-Eleven convenience store, and I'd hang out for about a half hour playing Mortal Kombat 2 until my next bus came. That was literally my routine every day. I knew the lady Rose at the store, like this was clockwork. So one day I'm sitting there, I'm playing Mortal Kombat 2 like I did every day, and I hear the chimes to the 7-Eleven, you hear the bell ring when someone walks in.
Yep.
And I hear a male's voice say, "Hey, Daniel." And of course, my name's Jordan. I'm not Daniel, so I keep playing my game. Within about 30 seconds to a minute later, I feel my body being picked up. I literally get shoved into the Terminator 2 pinball machine. I get punched in my ribs, thrown on the ground, and handcuffed. I don't know what the heck's going on. The lady at the store is yelling, "His name's Jordan. He's not Daniel." They're cussing her out, telling her to shut up. They throw me in the cop car. And they said, "We know that you're the Hispanic runaway." And I'm like, okay, I'm not Hispanic, and my name is Jordan. My dad's from the Philippines. Look at my jacket. I have my homework in there. And the guy reaches in my jacket. He pulls out the homework. It says my name on it. And when I tell you, brother, he turned like a ghost, and he said, "Oh crap." Right? That he made a mistake. I got falsely arrested for being a Hispanic runaway and beaten. And of course, these cops lost their jobs, and that's really all I wanted. I just wanted this thing to be over. I didn't want to go through this long judicial court process. So I just said, listen, all I want, Mom, is they shouldn't be cops, because I don't believe that there are bad cops. I believe there are bad people. Yeah. There are bad people in every job. Right. So that was pivotal moment number 2. So let's fast forward to 19 years old. I'm now been in the business-to-business sales world. We have an opportunity to open an office from California in New Jersey. It's going to be a new sales office. We're on this journey across the country. We end up driving through Wyoming, which if you've ever been there, it's very desolate, not a lot to look at. It's about 4 a.m. I'm in a Chevy King cab truck, and I'm faced like sideways. You can kind of shift over. You can be faced to see out the front rear view. I was faced to the side. I also didn't have my seatbelt on, and I was asleep. So I wake up to my buddy who was driving. He woke up because he had fallen asleep.
Oh boy.
He hits the gas. We're going 70, and we just start flipping. The truck starts to flip. He ends up being ejected. He lands 25 yards on the opposite side of the freeway. I didn't even know I was injured. The adrenaline's rushing. There's 2 other cars behind us that are with us. They're all freaking out. We're trying to find our friend. And so he ends up getting life flighted to Casper. He has, head injury, brain trauma. I get rushed because I ended up having 52 staples in my legs. I had a cut a fist deep and had to have laser surgery. I mean, this is a crazy accident. But the craziest part about this whole thing is we were all on the freeway. It's 4 a.m. Nobody's around. No close gas stations. And all of a sudden, 2 off-duty EMTs happen to be driving by on their way back from a conference. I mean, you want to talk about serendipitous moments? I mean, that was it. If they wouldn't have shown up, we wouldn't have been there. And so, I tell you these 3 pivotal moments because even though to most that would seem like adversity, I still don't feel like I've been through the adversity my mom went through. And when I tell you the other part of the story that I learned after her death, my grandmother was raped in Los Angeles, California in 1957. So, like, I shouldn't even be here. Like my grandmother was raped, who gives birth to my mom with one lung, who shouldn't survive, shouldn't have any kids. So the lens that I look at life through, my perspective is way different. Because again, these three pivotal moments, most people would say, holy crap, you've been through a lot. And I still say, not as much as mom went through, right? And that's what keeps me going. It keeps me positive, and it gives me this unique perspective at life.
Wow. Well, just looking at that, you had 53 bee stings, 52 staples. I guess the good thing is the impact is kind of decreasing every time you have one of these significant events happen to you. But wow, no, it's quite the story. Now, we have actually a couple similarities. Probably why I like you so much and why I enjoy your content. But I wouldn't say we were poor growing up. That's just my perspective. But I think we were definitely on the waiting list. We did start off in a family shelter when we first moved to Ontario, and I had a dad who was very influential in my life, who worked really hard to get us out of where we were. But yeah, definitely a great story. Now, you started touching a little bit on your career. Could you tell us a little bit about your career, how that's evolved, and what you're doing today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, full time, I actually do training and development for a national property management company. It's called Gables Residential. So, we own and manage luxury apartments across the US, over 30,000 units. And so, my responsibilities there is, I create content and then facilitate the content. Of course, when COVID hit, we had to shift everything from in person training to training online. And what does that look like? How do we now teach people an environment, keep them engaged, right? Keep them paying attention, because we know prior to COVID, no one wanted to be on a webinar. No one wanted to, you know what I'm saying? No one wanted to be on a virtual conference call, because they would just be on their phone on Facebook the whole time, or on LinkedIn just hanging out, because it wasn't engaging. So we had to really, one part of my job was to, when that happened, how do we shift now? How do we teach our people that are used to having a prospect show up to the building and then physically walk them through the building to see the amenities, to see all the pool, to see the apartment. And now that halted for everybody. So we had to think quick. Okay, how do we bring this now to a virtual environment, so that now we're getting people on Zoom calls and walking them through a video of the floor plan and talking about it contextually, and then dropping the application link in the Zoom chat so they can apply, right? So we had to get super creative because nobody knew what to do, right? Another part of my responsibility is I teach a 6-month leadership program. And this is a phenomenal program that, unfortunately, due to COVID, was canceled for 2020. But this program is amazing. It's predicated off the Myers-Briggs type indicator. I don't know if you've taken MBTI and know what your 4-letter type is, but it really deciphers whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you're more of an intuitive thinker or more of an analytical thinker, right? It dives into all the different dichotomies of the human persona. And one thing I tell people all the time is, listen, you are way more than your type. Type is a great tool, but we are way more than our type. But type is great to really take that introspective look at yourself and really come to the fruition that, wow, like, I'm not weird. It's just how I was wired, right? Like, I'm just wired this way. Like, when my wife took it, when you want to talk about a revelation, and us crying on our kitchen floor because we finally discovered like why we nag at each other for certain things, it's just because we're wired different, and I'm sure you can, being married, I'm sure you can relate to that. It's like, holy crap, like, you're not an idiot, like, that's just what you think, like, it's so funny when you can have those epiphanies when it comes to knowing about your personality.
No, absolutely. And I haven't done the Myers Briggs per se, but I've done a DISC assessment. I've done the Gallup Strengths Finder, but I think you've sold me on the Myers Briggs, and maybe getting my wife to do it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, very, very, very helpful. And we use the Strength Finder assessment. I love that assessment. I think it's super cool to be able to pinpoint your strengths and invest time and energy in them so that they don't start to diminish and turn into less than what they should be, right? I think that's super important. And I've actually, when I first discovered that, I think in 2014, about 6 years ago, I really thought about my parenting style and how I really needed to change and stop focusing on the bad grades and actually focus on the areas that my kids were good at and invest time and energy into their strength. Because what happens when you focus on the weaknesses, it beats them down. And our kids, I mean, they live in a crazy world, like not to mention a pandemic world, but like they're in a crazy world where there's so much anxiety that they're getting from their friends and from different things like that, that like the last thing you want to do is beat them down about their how they're doing in school, right? It's about how can I lift them up, you know? And that was a big shift for me as a parent to say, wow, like I've been focusing on the bad grades, but why haven't I been investing in the good one? You know, investing in extracurricular activities surrounding the actual strengths that are going to give and do them justice in their careers and their life.
Excellent. Now, actually, just for my own curiosity, of your top five, is one of them learner?
It actually isn't. It actually isn't. So I've got, I'm trying to see if I can remember them all. I know I am achiever, activator, communication, strategic, and that's at least four of them. Those are the four that I can remember offhand.
Okay, cool. Now, I want to circle back a little bit to this the 6 month leadership program that you do. Can you do a deeper dive into that and tell us more about that program?
Yeah. So like I said, it all starts out with, taking that introspective look. So prior to this is kind of a prerequisite of the program. Everybody takes the Myers-Briggs assessment. Now, as a certified practitioner, one of the rules is with the program is people have to self-assess first before you can even hand them their test results, right? And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Like people have to learn about each of the dichotomies, learn about introversion and extroversion, and decide for themselves, which one where they prefer to get their energy from. Because if you just took the report and then you lived your life based on this report, and when you were taking the assessment, you weren't in the right mindset, right? You were kind of basing it based off of like what your friends think you are, right? So there's a lot that could go into that in skewing the results. So that's one thing we tell people when you're taking the assessment, make sure you're in a clear headspace, make sure you're answering everything in a very neutral environment. And this is literally because it's your preference. It's what you prefer. Okay. Because we all are introverted and extroverted. We just don't do them both with equal ease. Right. Does that make sense? And so
Absolutely.
that's the first session is learning about yourself. The next one we jump into strengths-based leadership where they do take the Gallup Strengths Finder assessment. And we also jump into emotional intelligence. So they take the assessment from Emotional Intelligence 2.0. So that's really, really cool for them to kind of learn about the 4 buckets of EQ, learn about what their strengths are, and now how can they invest energy into the strengths. And then we jump into change management. We talk about how to manage a high performing team. We talk about conflict resolution. We have everyone take the Thomas Kilmann assessment, the TKI, and it tells them their conflict style. And we talk about how not all conflict is bad. Sometimes conflict is necessary to coming to a conclusion for the end result, and then from there, everyone actually has to do, they have to partner up with a team and do a business challenge to solve a real company problem that will later actually be turned into a company initiative. In addition to that, they have to come up with their own personal leadership philosophy and present that to their peers. And then there's graduation and things like that. So it's a really, really cool program. I think my favorite part about it is I get to coach, the 15 or 16 people every month that are in the cohort. So I really get to take a deep dive into who they are and really get to see people's growth and these aha moments happen throughout the program.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, I just want to think in terms of strategy for, for everybody who's listening. So I'll just ask you to share some ideas with us. Now, say we're to take some of these assessments, the Myers-Briggs, for example, and we get our results back. What would be some first steps on improving some of our leadership skills just based on the results that we get back?
Yeah, and that's actually, I'm glad you asked that because what's really cool about the assessment is it actually gives you really, really deep context. So you're not only going to know like what your type is, like what your preferences are, but there's something called the preference clarity index that actually shows you where you are on that scale. It was so funny because for mine, all of mine are at the very top that they can be. where some people might, like introversion and extroversion might be right split down the middle. So you could really flip to either one. So you get context there. You also get, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses, right? So it actually literally gives you information on how you can improve yourself and how you can also start to recognize things in other people. Because let's face it, introversion and extroversion, if I'm around you for a little bit, I can get a good sense of which one you are, right? I mean, that's kind of surface level things. And it's actually the same thing with judging and perceiving, which is, people that are perceiving types, they're more flexible and more spontaneous. And people that are more the judging type, they need to plan, they need to check the box off and things like that. Those are also two of the dichotomies that I can recognize in people by just spending a little bit of time with them. The ones in the middle are the harder ones to figure out.
Excellent. So is there any, could you give an example of just some growth that you've seen from going through this process with somebody, obviously without mentioning names or anything, but is there anybody who sticks out specifically as really benefiting from this process?
Yeah, it's so crazy because year over year, I feel like the impact has increased, right? Like, and when I say that, I feel like year over year, I've had more feedback about people and their growth. Like, I literally had people. The last one I did in Atlanta, I had probably 8 people crying and saying that the program changed their life. And for me, that means everything, right? Because I'm just a vessel. Like, the content is really what's going to do the job justice, but I get to be, a vessel and help people along their journey. And what I notice, and you probably have heard this before, but in Japan, they say that teaching is learning twice,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because you've had to consume the information in order to teach it. And when you teach it again, you're learning it all over again. And so for me, I've not just seen growth in the participants, but I've seen so much, and I've heard other people say they've seen so much growth in me. And that's been really cool.
No, definitely. I can echo that sentiment. Same thing. Like I teach at 2 local colleges as well. And it's true because you have to refresh in the content all the time. Being able to explain it to somebody else really helps you kind of drill it down. So no, I can definitely see the value in that and definitely appreciate that and understand how that piece works. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the emotional intelligence piece too, the EQ testing that you put people through. Can you talk a little bit about that process as well and kind of how that works?
Yeah. So we use the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0. We have everybody take that assessment, and that assessment really does a good job at, well, the book itself does a really good job at breaking down the 4 buckets, right? EQ starts with self-awareness, right? You have to understand yourself and know how you react and respond to situations. And then once you have that baseline down, then it goes to the next box, which is self-management. So now that you are aware how you show up, are you doing a good job at managing your own emotions and making sure that you're not going to say something that you didn't want to say or you want to wish you could take back, right? And then it goes into the social awareness piece. So now that you understand yourself and how to manage yourself, are you showing up the right way in social situations? And then it jumps into my favorite that I think I scored the highest in, which is relationship management, right? Are you able to cultivate and manage relationships? And it's so funny that, that was my top ranking thing in the when I took the assessment, but it actually was lower than it should have been, I think, because I didn't see it as a value. Because I think I've always been that guy, like the one in my friends group, that like all my friends from high school, I'm the one that's always texting them and checking in on them and seeing how they're doing. And when I come in town, everyone gets together. They may not have seen each other all year, but when I come in, I'm the guy that, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's just always
Yeah.
been me. My wife always is like, how do you talk to so many people? Like, from 20 friends from 25 years. I'm like, I don't know. I'm the one that just keeps that conversation going. But all 4 buckets are important, and all of us have room to grow in all of the areas. But one thing about EQ versus IQ is, IQ is really something, and again, we can probably have a long debate about this, but I think that IQ is something that you're born with and you've got it, and it's not doing a whole lot of shifting, right? Your intellect will of course increase as you get older, but I think you've got what you've got, and EQ is one of those things where you can actually grow and expand on the muscles, right? If you're doing exercise to grow them. And one other thing about EQ that I've been having a lot of conversations with different podcast guests on my show. And I've been thinking a lot about is I really feel like if you've been through a lot of adversity, it actually heightens your EQ. It heightens your awareness because of the circumstances that you've been through.
No, I would have to agree with that as well. Now, in light of everything that's happened because of this pandemic, I know you talked about, obviously, we've been talking about the 6-month leadership program that had to be canceled this year. What have you kind of been working on to fill in the gap?
Yeah. So one of the things I've been working on, well, the first thing that happened is, of course, when we got the official news that you're going to be working remote, like once, I think this was like early March. I think I've been working from my home office since like the 15th of March, right? Like when the early stuff happened. And the first thing that we did is we jumped on a call, just like probably a lot of organizations. And it was like, okay, like, what do we do now? Right? Like, what do we do now? People used to be able to walk in and rent an apartment. Now they can't. So now what do we do? So the first thing that I did is I actually created a course that taught our associates how to shoot video with their phone so that they could go to the apartment models, shoot videos of the models, and then upload that. And then I taught them how to create a YouTube account for the property so they could upload the content to YouTube and then use the links to share with prospects so they could take a virtual tour. Right. So that was like that. And that was like 24-hour turnaround. I built that and deployed it. Right. The next iteration of that was, okay, now that we know that this thing's here to stay, how do we make something more sustainable? So the next thing I did was I built a course on how to maximize sales in a virtual environment. So it's teaching people how to use Zoom, right? How to use our CRM to formulate our copy to prospects that say, I would love for you to jump on a virtual call with me where I could take you on a virtual tour of the apartment, right? So again, it just different iterations of that training kept happening as we progressed into the months. But since COVID hit, I've built 6 new sales training courses. I built a new series called the Virtual Corner. The first 2 topics are overcoming objections and painting the picture. So I've built those. I also built a course called Social Selling with Engaging Content Strategy. And it was teaching our associates how to use an app to shoot video and add dynamic overlay and text and captions and post it on social, and then how to do the basics of copywriting, how to engage with the audience. I was literally teaching them how to essentially make our digital marketing presence better and bigger.
Right. So you became well, I'm sure you already were a very valuable guy, but that much more valuable in this pandemic situation to your organization.
I'd like to think so. I would like to think so. And for me, it's I'm one of those people that I love pressure. Like people, if I get a deadline, I'm like, yes, let's go. And my team, I think, doesn't enjoy that sometimes because I can be kind of a last minute guy, but I think that they've learned that I'm going to deliver, although I'm not the type of person that wants to have it ready and done. And, like, a day beforehand, I'm more kind of like the morning of I'm finishing up, but that's just how I'm wired. That's how I like to work. And I also love having like 6 or 7 projects at the same time. Whereas my coworkers are like, nope, I got to have the first one. I got to check all the boxes off the first one. But again, this is where self-awareness comes into play. You have to understand how you're wired. And I have to know, because again, I do have to account for what if somebody I'm working with, like a designer, is delayed, so I do have to contextually think about those things, but I think I like to play with fire too. so I like that pressure.
Now, one thing that you made me kind of think of there, have you went out to, I guess, deliberately surround yourself with people maybe who complement your your strengths and maybe pick you up where in the areas where you're not as strong?
Oh man. So our team self-titled the Magnificent Seven. Like we all know our strengths, we all know our weaknesses. And when I tell you we run like a well-oiled machine. I mean, if we look at from a pure content perspective, we have created since COVID hit collectively as a team, there's only 7 people, mind you, over 40 new classes. I mean, it's insane. That's more classes than we put out in all of 2019, in all of half of 2018. I mean, it's like, so yeah, when you look at it from a value perspective, I would definitely hope that the powers that be say, like for one, wow. And for two, like, do you really need to work in the office? Like, you guys are doing great from your home offices and you're making stuff right? Like, so I think a lot of organizations are going to look at what's happening, because again, I've been telling people there is no normal. We're not going back, right? Like, this is the new normal. So now we got to contextually think about, does it make sense to put 100 people in an office, or does that maybe number have to get down to a quarter of those people that really need to be there, and let's have the people that have been performing in this other new environment stay there? I mean, think about the dollars we've saved in our travel budget. No one's been on airplanes. Like, no one's been in hotels or eating meal. Like, there's so much savings that has been happening, but the output has been even increased, which is the crazy to think about.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a different time, and it's just interesting how everything has kind of culminated to that. Now, there's a lot of stuff that you do. Obviously, you do some speaking, you do the podcast. What are some of these interests? Can you talk to us a little about about the first of all, I guess we'll start off with the Blaze Your Own Trail podcast. Can you talk about that? That's how I became familiar with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. I've been telling people this as I've been guesting on podcasts, but this is kind of my second go at creating a show. And I hope people will learn from this lesson, because I learned some lessons in why my first show didn't even come to fruition. And it was because I didn't have clarity. Like, I didn't have, like, I knew I had things to talk about, but like, I recorded 2 solo episodes that I uploaded to Buzzsprout that no one's probably ever heard. And it literally like stopped at that, because for one, I wasn't committed to the name of the show. I didn't know exactly why I wanted to start it. I just knew that at some point I wanted to get into the space, right? And this is really, for me, it was a powerful lesson of clarity and vision and purpose. And so, like, that was back in May of 2019. So my show actually launched January 1st of 2020, the Blaze Your Own Trail podcast. So I decided on the name for one. So I had to have a name first, and I knew that I wanted to incorporate my favorite sports team, which is the Portland Trail Blazers, right? And so I thought about it. I said, what would be a good name of a show? And I was like, well, I love the Blazers, and I love thinking about people that have blazed their own trail, like actual trailblazers that have done things. And I said, that's it. And I thought about, okay, what do I want the topic to be? And I said, well, I would love to really just hear about people's journeys, like from childhood to today, and learn about everything they've gone through to get to where they are. And so once I had that clarity, I knew I had to get a couple guests. So like, my first guest was a guy that really mentored me on LinkedIn, Brian Schulman. I don't know if you've seen his content, but he's a guy I always give credit to, because he convinced me to start showing up on camera and putting out content. And he told me, I remember him specifically telling me in May of last year, he's like, brother, you're going to build a big brand, and you're going to have a bigger brand than I have. And I remember looking like, there's no way, like, there's no way any of that would be possible, but amazing things happen when you take action, right? When you take action, you can actually create momentum, and that momentum will turn into progress, and that progress will turn into consistency. And then that turns into results. Right. And so, I definitely I credit him. And it's funny how certain people will see something in us that we don't see in ourselves, right? Because I think a lot of us live with that imposter syndrome of like, who's going to want to see me? Who's going to want to listen to my podcast? Who's going to want to read my book? We have those thoughts. And so he lit that fire under me. And so, of course, I had to have him as the first guest. And then I kind of swung for the fences. I reached out to Heather Monahan. We had been connected on LinkedIn for about a year, and I reached out to her, and she agreed to be on as my second guest. And so, I did I had 2 episodes ready plus my intro episode at launch. I launched on New Year's Day, and then it's really, really picked up since then. I mean, I've been fortunate to have on some big names, in my opinion, guys like David Meltzer, who's the CEO and founder of Sports One, with Warren Moon, who's a guy that I've idolized in the football world, and he had a great experience, and now he actually sends me his clients to be on my show. And it's just crazy what can happen when you take action, when you've got clarity, when you've got a vision, right? And when you're like, for me, it's about how can I add value and impact people on a global scale. And so that's really what, the show's all about.
Awesome. No, you're really doing it. You're impacting people on a global scale. The podcast is, the podcast is fire. I love the podcast. It's great. It's one of the ones that are on my regular playlist. So, good job on all that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
What are you working on today? Like, what can we expect from you in the months to come?
Yeah, just more content, right? I set a goal we talked about this off air, but I set a goal at the beginning of the year. I wanted to have 50 podcast episodes by the end of the year. And I was looking through my records and everything, and I've already recorded 61. So I kind of blew that initial goal out of the water. So I'm going to, my goal is to shoot for 100 for the year, and really be able to share stories. And one thing I've been priding myself on my show is I try to ask questions that are thoughtful, right? And that they've never been asked before. And when I tell you, it's been very interesting that a good portion of my episodes, you'll actually hear the guests say, I've never been asked that question. And that's something that, as you know, as a host, it's powerful, right? It's powerful when someone can think of something new or be kind of like stopped in their tracks for a second and really bring them back to that environment they were in to give context to that question. Like, to me, that's super powerful.
Awesome. I guess, is there anything that I haven't asked you yet that you want to discuss?
No, listen, I love everything that you're doing. I really appreciate you reaching out to have me come anytime I can really share my story and what I'm up to and hopefully add value to someone else's journey. I mean, that's what I'm all about. I set a goal to be on a guest on 25 podcasts this year. I think this is number 16 or so. So I'm getting close to that goal, but for me, it's just all about connecting and building relationships. And I'm one of those people, like, if you want to reach out to me, whether it's on social media or via email, I'm always about making time to jump on a call and talk to people. I think that's what business is all about. It's about getting to know people, getting context into them as a human, right? Because once you can get to the human side of people, then business is easy after that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one thing I will say about that, you really encouraged me actually to tell my story. I listened to your interview with Jesse T. So I was recently on there, and I like the point that you made, basically, that your story isn't necessarily for you, but it can help somebody else. And I'm paraphrasing, but I opened up and told a lot of things that I hadn't told too many people before. So thank you for giving me the I guess the courage to do that. And again, just keep up the great work. Now, one thing that you had mentioned as well is that you're open to anybody reaching out to you. What are the best ways to get in touch with Jordan Mendoza?
Yeah. So, I mean, the number one platform I'm on, I've invested about 15 months into LinkedIn and recently maxed out on connections. So unfortunately, I can't accept any new connections unless someone decides to remove me. So it's kind of a weird thing, because now, every day I look, I'm almost at like 500 pending requests. So I feel bad. And I'm like, man, do I like individually message all these people and say, I'm not a dirt bag, like I just can't accept you, So I'm struggling with that a little bit. And I don't know why they pick that, 30,000 connection limit. I'm not sure, but yeah, no, LinkedIn, I do have an open profile. So whether you can connect with me or not, you can still send me a message. So anyone my messages are open. Send me a message. If there's any way I can help you with anything or add value to you, reach out. I'm also on Instagram at Jordan J. Mendoza, TikTok at Blaze Your Own Trail. I've got a YouTube channel on Facebook. So yeah, if you just Google Jordan J. Mendoza, you'll be able to find the podcast, my LinkedIn. You'll be able to find most everything there. If you just Google Jordan Mendoza, there's a famous comedian who's been on Comedy Central. That's not me. Okay, so if you see Comedy Central pop up, you've got the wrong guy.
Well, awesome. Appreciate all that. Thanks for your time, Jordan. I, again, appreciate all the work you're doing, and thank you for coming on the Healthcare Security Cast today.
Hey, it's been my honor, my friend.
And this concludes another episode of the Healthcare Security Cast. Join us next week when we're joined by Kendall Moore, who's the Chief Security Officer at Dayton Children's Hospital. In the meantime, don't forget to connect with the Healthcare Security Cast on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Also, feel free to join my texting platform, My Community. To join, all that's required is sending a text message that simply says join to 647-372-2042. That number again is 647-372-2042. Thanks again for listening, and until next week, stay safe and take care.